Hello and welcome to The Hub on CGTN. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. As we mark the World Refugee Day, we're reminded by a sad reality. The number of refugees worldwide from the year 2015 through 2025 has actually doubled. Now, Ms. Doaa Zamel is a Syrian refugee who fled her home country over a decade ago. Her incredible journey of ordeal was written into a book by none other than the current Under-Secretary General of the United Nations, Fleming. Now, I was very honored to have both of them on my show today. Thank you so much, Under-Secretary General Fleming, for this opportunity. And Doaa, what an honor it is to have you here in Beijing, China, a cultural center of China. So first of all, if you don't mind, can you share with us a little bit about the signing ceremony here and then your interaction with the Chinese readers about this book?
Yes, it's so great to be here in Page One Bookstore on World Refugee Day, releasing the Chinese version of A Hope More Powerful Than the Sea. I was really moved by how many people came and how many people were even have already read the book, even in English perhaps, but also wanted to read the book, being very moved from us reading from the book or telling the story. But this comes after also attending the Beijing Book Fair and having an official launch of the book in Chinese and getting an incredibly moving and inspiring response.
And out of the many stories and personal experiences you have been witnessing and been dealing with over the years, working with the UNHCR and then as the Chief of Global Communications, you must have come across many, many stories. When did the idea of picking up Doaa's story and then making it a book, elaborated storytelling, first come to you?
Well, it was actually 10 years ago when 1 million Syrian refugees were coming to Europe. And people were at first very welcoming of all of those refugees in European countries. But soon, because of social media, things started to turn against them. Public opinion started to turn against them. Refugees started to become politicized. And so I started to look into behavioral science and realized that people, when they are confronted with large numbers, their reaction is to become numb or even to feel fear. And so the antidote to that, I learned, is individual stories. And so I went on a quest for an individual story, and an individual story in which, of course, almost every refugee faces tragedy, the tragedy of war. But what is really important to move people is to show their resilience. And Doaa's story is a universal story, not just about Syrian refugees, but about anyone who is forced to flee their home and to take dangerous journeys. The courage that you find from within yourself that you didn't know you had, the people who help you, the organization, the UNHCR, that does so much for refugees. It's all contained in that story.
So what's most striking about that story? Because that story is about almost couldn't make it, and then eventually surviving unimaginable adversities in the middle of the ocean, of the sea. What's most striking about it for you?
What's most striking is that somebody so small, petite, even frail at the time, would be one of the survivors when 500, many much stronger than Doaa, many who could also swim, that she was the one who survived. And she survived because her resilience, but also because her faith in saving another life. She survived to save the lives of 2 babies who had just lost their whole families to drowning. And she knew she had to do everything possible, not to save herself, but to save them. It is a miracle that she and the little baby, Masa, managed to survive. And she's a hero. And that's what I wanted to bring out to inspire people around the world on the strength of the human spirit. even at times of unbelievable adversity.
Doaa, let me ask you, already 4 days in the water, changing hands, changing ships, something you were forced to do by the smugglers. And then, very unfortunately, and I'm sorry to touch upon this, but you lost your fiancé who, tried to hold on to it for 2 more days, but couldn't make it. And then at this point, 2 babies were basically thrown at you by what was 4 days ago, just strangers. What was it like?
It was one of the hardest experiences of my life. I was fighting for my life, battling the waves, with death surrounding me at every moment. I was thirsty, hungry, and scared. I couldn't swim at all, and yet I was holding 2 little girls in my arms. Both of them were under my responsibility. Even though I was afraid of the water and the sea and didn't know how to swim.
Was it, a recurring thought or a near-death thought that perhaps you will end up there, you will not be able to survive all that?
I never gave up. Every single moment out there at sea, it felt like death was closing in from every direction. I honestly thought I was going to die, but whenever I felt I was about to perish and join the others who had lost their lives, deep down, there was always this feeling that I will make it through and that I will see my family again.
Very powerful indeed, and respect to you. But looking back at this day, Madam Undersecretary General, we have a staggering set of numbers from 2015 through 2025. In a span of 10 years, displacement has almost doubled. What do you make of this reality as we mark the Refugees Day of the United Nations?
It's absolutely staggering, those numbers. It's 122 million people around the world who have been forced to flee from their homes. Part of it is because of new wars, like the horrific war in Sudan. But a lot of it is also because the old wars are not yet solved. And people are living for years, even decades in exile, unable to return home. There was, though, a very inspiring part of the story and part of those statistics this year. And that is that there has been a change in government in Syria. And 2 million Syrian refugees returned home to Syria. They felt safe again to return home to Syria and to rebuild their lives. So we're talking about Syrian refugees today, and there is some hope in that country. We need more peace. Peace is too scarce right now, and we all need to, as citizens, as countries, as the United Nations, work more towards peace, because that underlies everything that is important for the security, the safety, and the prosperity of our world.
Doaa, Melissa has just talked about the change of government in your country. What are your expectations? What will be your message to the world who are watching this program about the situation? Do you hold out hope that perhaps more people can return to your country? What about yourself? Do you have plans to perhaps go back to Syria one day?
Of course, I really hope one day I can go back to visit my country and maybe even settle there. But unfortunately, Syria still needs so much to recover and to be able to function again. It's going to take a lot of support to get things back on track, maybe even better than before. I pin a lot of hope on the new government to bring back peace, not just for those still in Syria, but for all of us living abroad too. I truly wish to return to Syria one day, but I know the country still needs so much to develop and rebuild from the ground up. My hope is that the new Syrian government will help make it possible by spreading peace and making it safe for Syrians everywhere to come back home.
السوريين إلى سوريا.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Melissa, you talk about the fact that sometimes it's important to put a human face to the refugees, to those displaced from their home. What are the things that's missing from the headlines that are often geopoliticized these days? You know, the camps of the West versus that of the East. What about the individual human stories aspect of things that people should pay attention to?
Well, I think very often the news focuses on the numbers, and it's a bit in the abstract for people. So, you know, part of my communication strategy at the United Nations is not just to inform people, but to find ways through storytelling and through individual stories so that people can feel empathy, so that they can care, and that they can also want to get involved and to do something. So I think that's our challenge. I know for journalists as well, they're finding that because people are feeling in our digital world so overwhelmed by all of the bad news all of the time, it feels so much gloom and doom, that there actually is a movement in journalism called solutions journalism. And that's something that I've adopted in UN News and UN Communications. And that is, yes, we need to inform people about the state of the world, about geopolitics, about the reasons so many people are hungry, so many people are fleeing for their lives. But we also need to provide a reason for hope. A reason for hope that is in the form of, yes, there is a problem, there is always a solution for everything. And that is my appeal also to media organizations, but also to everyone. Look for how a problem can be solved and look how you can be part of the solution.
You said that the internet needs to be more humane.
Yes.
But these days, to be realistic, it is a little difficult for the mass, for ordinary folks to look beyond the headlines. How do you feel, Doaa? What are the things that people should pay attention to? How do you plan to use your personal ordeal to perhaps send a message to the people out there? What should they know more about refugees?
Refugees are people who fled their countries to survive. They want to study and learn, and they escaped and became refugees because they were seeking a better life and wanted to preserve their dignity. I hope the world, collectively, will treat refugees as human beings.
And then, Melissa, how do you feel about the current media landscape? How can we really cut through the politicization of news or the corporate control of news, which oftentimes ignore the nuances?
I'm really worried about our information. There is too much disinformation and misinformation and even hate speech that is polluting the digital environment. And there's so many people who get their news from their screens, from social media, and they get their news from people who are news influencers, but they're not trained journalists. Our message is, and we've released recently UN Global Principles on Information Integrity. We need to work harder on, just like we work on our environment to clean it up from pollutants and toxins, we need to have an information landscape that is based on facts and is based on information that is for the public good. So that's why public interest media, there is a term for it. public interest media needs to be supported. This is journalism that is working for the greater good. Of course, it is holding leaders to account. Of course, it is doing investigative work, but it is also providing information that is vital to citizens, and is also gives them the tools and the knowledge and the solutions to improve our world.
What concerns you the most currently? Because there is a war going on between Israel and Iran. What are you looking out for when you watch out for this war that is ongoing?
Well, the Secretary General has been very outspoken. He has issued a statement. He has called for the end. He has called for a return to dialogue. He believes that there is a political solution that can work through negotiations, that through the International Atomic Energy Agency, for example, and through the parties that were negotiating around Iran's nuclear program. So our hope is that this does not become a war. We don't need any more wars in our world.
From the perspective of a refugee and the displaced, are you concerned about the potential displacement given what's happening in Gaza already?
The situation in Gaza is unspeakable, and this is something that we are putting all of our energy in. Our humanitarians are risking their lives to try to keep people alive in Gaza. We're demanding more access so that we can provide people with food so they don't starve, with the medicines so they can be treated. It's a very unusual refugee situation because the people cannot leave Gaza. Many of them don't want to leave also for political reasons. But in any situation where bombs are falling, people will flee, and people are already fleeing.
Doaa, when you look at the bombing, the fighter jets and artillery bombs, targeting certain countries, and civilians, women and children were suffering in Gaza, in Iran, and in Israel, in Palestine, everywhere. As a former refugee yourself, you must be able to empathize with them more. How do you feel?
Definitely. I carry a deep compassion for people around the world who are enduring genocide and the horrors of war. At the heart of it all, we are human beings. We all deserve the right to live in peace. No one should have to suffer death, famine, or the agony of losing loved ones to war, bombs, or weapons. My deepest hope is that these conflicts will come to an end. Sadly, I can only hope for the day when wars will finally come to an end and peace will prevail. I hope that leaders and decision makers begin to think of the children, the women, of all the innocent lives caught in the crossfire. Surely, no one truly wants war. That's why I call on politicians and those in power to stand with the oppressed, to speak out for those facing genocide and destruction.
And Melissa, are you happy that this book is out now and the impact that it has maybe reached your expectations?
Yes, it really has. It's now almost in about 20 languages, and there is a young readers edition, and I'm just so pleased that there's a new Chinese edition of the book that was released at the Beijing Book Fair, which gives it more publicity, and also that we have the chance to speak to you and through your program to introduce the book. So thank you very much.
Just so you know, the book is translated into Chinese, the updated edition rather, Wang Yang Zhui Xing, the stars above a sea of ocean. It's a transliteration, it's not a word-for-word translation of a hope more powerful than the sea. Anything else you want to talk to our viewers about hope? Because that is turning out to be something that is very powerful. If you think about the human journey, other than all the politics that we hear in the news media.
Well, I mean, the reason I chose that title for the book, Hope, is I think it drives so many people, even if you're at the depths of despair or suffering. What I've found when I've met so many refugees all over the world in war zones and refugee camps is that there is something that can never be bombed, can never be destroyed, and that is the hope that we carry inside us. And it is hope for a better day. It is hope for the education of our children. It is the hope to rebuild our lives. And I think that's something that we should all be grateful for, because this hope is very powerful.
How do you think young people who are watching this program can perhaps, work on themselves to forge this kind of discipline and internal fortitude, to be able to hold out hope, but in times of adversity, can really stand up to the occasion like Doaa has?
I think one thing that really works is maybe a daily practice of gratitude, because if we are privileged to live in a country where there is no conflict and no war, it's something to be really grateful for. If one is able to go to school, to attend university, that's something to be grateful for. If you have food at your table, it is also something to be grateful for. And at the same time, to recognize, while one is expressing this gratitude, that there are so many people around the world that don't have that. And maybe there is something that you can do individually to help.
Doaa, Melissa said we should not take things for granted. We should be grateful. What is your understanding of being grateful after all that you've been through?
Of course, we should always be grateful for the things we have and thankful for the people who support us along the way to provide the things we need and what we dream of.
And then what do you want to say to those, young people who are these days experiencing anxiety, even depression? They don't know what to do with their lives. They're feeling anxious, depressed, and not satisfied with what they have.
My message to young people today will be this: stay strong and never give up. Life serves you a lot of challenges and heavy responsibilities. And yes, it can be really tough, but we should keep fighting and never surrender in front of all of it.
So Undersecretary General, China over the years has lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. Our President Xi, recently proposed the Global Development Initiative. Actually, that has been proposed quite a few years ago. How do you look at China's approach of elevating the standard of living and therefore human rights through developmental economics, through economic development?
Well, this is very aligned with the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. I'm wearing the SDG pin, which is that everyone has the right to live on a planet in dignity and with rights, but also on a healthy planet. We need more equality and less inequality. So economic efforts to develop and to allow people to be lifted out of poverty is a huge aspiration of the United Nations, and China has made a big global contribution to that and to our efforts as a UN human family that understands that we need development for everyone around the world for the prosperity of individual nations. We can't go at it alone.
You've been to quite a number of countries. Anything concrete that impressed you? Be it trains or the infrastructure or things digital here in China?
Well, I know that China, in Africa in particular, but also in Latin America, has contributed greatly to infrastructure projects that are very needed in developing countries. And this is something I know that there are many joint projects, in particular Our office here in China, our resident coordinator office, is working on projects together with China in Africa and making these connections around needs, around investment, and around development that is essential for the needs of countries. We're about to go into a big UN conference called Financing for Development, where we are hoping that together with the UN members, that we're able to collectively change the international financial architecture. So that was born after World War II, and much has changed. We don't have colonies anymore in many parts of the world, and we have many countries that are facing terrible debt and who are anxious to get out of debt, but also to have investments in their development, not just infrastructure, but in particular, we're facing a global climate crisis, and we need countries that are developing quickly to transition into renewable energy. That's happening here in such impressive ways in China. The transition to renewable energy is going faster than I think most places, as well as electric vehicles. And this is, I think, a model for many parts of the world.
Yeah, I took a Tesla here today, a taxi that happens to be a Tesla, which is, electric vehicle.
Well, I was in Mexico City recently, and almost every single Uber was a BYD.
That's awesome.
Yes.
I saw a lot of BYDs in Brazil too recently.
In Brazil as well.
In Brazil, yeah. In São
Yes,
Paulo.
and our resident coordinator switched his car, his official vehicle, to a BYD, which I rode in yesterday. It was very beautiful.
A key document that the United Nations has passed over the years is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Given today's context, how relevant do you think that is? How should people revisit and remember that very piece of document?
Well, we just celebrated its 75th anniversary last year, and I think we all recognize that this Universal Declaration of Human Rights is as relevant and valid today as it was when it was signed. It really is the recognition that every single human being has human rights, and it is a very powerful document. It just needs to be upheld.
Doaa and Undersecretary General Fleming, thank you both so very much. And that will do it for this edition of The Hub on CGTN. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. I'll see you again next time.